The Black Death arrived like a storm. It swept across Europe without warning, and by the time it passed, it had claimed 1/3 of the population. But as death spread like wildfire, another figure emerged from the shadows, the plague doctor. Plague doctors were not healers, but a grotesque symbol of fear. They wore long beak-like masks filled with aromatic herbs, a misguided attempt to ward off the miasma or bad air, which they believed spread the disease. Their black robes and tall hats made them appear as more of a grim omen than saviors, but in reality, they were often no more equipped to deal with the plague than the people they tried to help. The origins of the plague were not understood, and superstition was the only guide. Doctors prescribed treatments like bloodletting, leeching, and lancing buboes, all of which only worsened the situation. People thought the disease was a punishment from God, and the plague doctors were seen as agents of divine retribution. To be seen by a plague doctor was to face your fate, and often, that fate was death. The doctors worked in terrifying isolation. Most of them had never seen the true causes of the disease. They were sent into towns and villages where death was rampant, and they had no answers, only fear. Some doctors tried to fight the plague by using incense, by placing their patients in dark rooms, or by practicing rituals to appease God. Others were so desperate for answers that they turned to witchcraft, convinced that the cure could only be found in dark magic. In many cases, the plague doctors did not even attempt to cure the ill. Their job was often to observe the afflicted and collect bodies. They kept their distance, knowing that touching the sick could result in their own death. The beak masks they wore were filled with flowers, herbs, and vinegar-soaked cloths to filter the foul air. But no masks could protect against the plague. The Black Death was not just a physical affliction. It destroyed minds and souls as well. The streets were filled with the sick and dying, many of whom were abandoned by their families. The plague did not discriminate. Kings, queens, peasants, and priests all succumbed to its relentless grip. The world became a place of terror where death was no longer a quiet visitor but a loud and persistent presence. The psychological toll of the plague was staggering. People began to turn on each other. Fear, grief, and panic led to violence. Family members abandoned their own, unwilling to risk the infection. Villages became ghost towns, and the very idea of community began to unravel. The once bustling markets became empty, and the churches, which had been places of hope, turned into places of despair. Those who survived the plague were left to grapple with the aftermath. The physical wounds of the disease healed, but the mental scars remained. The memory of seeing friends and family succumb to the disease haunted the living. Survivors were left with a deep sense of loss, and many struggled to find meaning in a world that had been so cruel. The plague doctors themselves were often as much victims as the people they tried to save. They faced public scorn and suspicion, even though they had little understanding of how the disease spread. Many doctors died from the plague, while others fled from the infected areas, abandoning their posts. Those who remained often saw their patients die in front of them, unable to offer any real help. The Black Death left a permanent mark on Europe. It reshaped the economy, society, and culture. It shattered any illusion of divine protection and left people with a sense of hopelessness. The plague doctors, once seen as figures of authority, became symbols of failure. The world had learned the harshest lesson of all, that there were no guarantees, and death could come swiftly, without mercy. After the plague passed, the memory of its devastation lingered. Art, literature, and folklore became darker, reflecting the profound impact the Black Death had on the collective consciousness. The plague doctors, once seen as figures of authority, became subjects of fear and curiosity. They were depicted in paintings, stories, and plays, often as monstrous figures, reminding people of the horrors they had witnessed. If this is the kind of history you want to hear, subscribe to Medieval Decay. Would you have trusted the plague doctors, or would you have feared them as much as the disease itself? Tell us in the comments.